Welcome to the High Rise Podcast, presented by Headset, the leading data and analytics company for the cannabis industry.
So, Emily, a little bit earlier this year, the tail end of August, a study was published in the International Journal of Neuropsychopharmacology that was studying cannabis use and potential linkage with apathy. And kind of surprising, unsurprising, the results of this study suggest that cannabis use at a frequency of 3 to 4 days a week is not associated with apathy, effort-based decision-making for reward wanting, or reward linking in adults, which is pretty cool. So it's good to know cannabis consumers are out there motivated to get things done, which is very much unlike Congress, it would appear, because here we are at the tail end of the year, now officially in the lame duck session. And they're finally kind of talking about doing something, it looks like.
Yeah.
Or not.
Seems like a lot of lip service being paid to this issue again, but I do think it's interesting that it took, 2 years of having the majority of the Senate to be facing this 50-50 split, with Kamala Harris, of course, being the tiebreaker. And, we'll watch and wait to see what happens December 6th in Georgia. But maybe this next, what is it? How many weeks? It's like literally 6 weeks until the end of the year or something. And they've got to get it done. And so I'm hoping that this is like, folks who have ADHD do better when they have deadlines to get things done. And they tend to wait and I speak from experience on this. You need that deadline to force the action. And so there's already movement. Booker's been talking about it since this was announced that the Senate was going 50-50 over the weekend. And so I just hope that talk goes into action.
Yeah, it does seem like procrastination is the secret here, because they wait, they have about 2 years, right, with control of the House and the Senate, and just talk a whole bunch. And now, with the House going Republican, maintaining their slim majority of the Senate, but seeing that time is literally running out here, they're talking about doing something. And the reason we mention this is because today, Cory Booker said that marijuana reform can pass now during the lame duck session, or many years from now after the GOP takes House control. So it's kind of like, well, we could do it now in a matter of weeks, or, maybe some years from now. It's like, it's ridiculous. They had all this time and here we are. So, I hope that something happens. It sounds like there's a lot of things out there beyond cannabis that people want to make happen and ensure happen. But given how much they have talked about it over the last years, and talk being the key word, and not much action, it would make sense if they were able to do it. And not that Congress is completely all not doing anything. I mean, there's also today, did you see this memo that got published around cannabis, particularly about reforms at the federal level? Yeah, so this is interesting too. So they're holding a hearing. It's the subcommittee on civil rights and civil liberties, a hearing on, quote, developments in state cannabis laws and bipartisan cannabis reforms at the federal level. This is good. They're really looking at decriminalizing at the federal level, criminal justice reform, but they're addressing 3 key areas they highlighted: decriminalizing cannabis at the federal level, right? And then reforms, including criminal justice. And then finally, the federal government establishing protocols to regulate cannabis as it does alcohol, which is pretty interesting, especially on this question of what does a rescheduling of the schedule look like? Is it a deschedule, or is it getting rescheduled? And if it's getting rescheduled, I think that means number 3, this, protocols to regulate cannabis as alcohol would not apply. That would only work for descheduling, right? Because alcohol is not scheduled.
That's right. And so, it'll be interesting this is ahead of this hearing that is actually happening tomorrow. And Nancy Mace, again, is taking up the mantle on this, which I give her credit for doing this. She said it was actually a year from when she introduced the States
Reform Act?
Reform Act, right. And for anyone interested in understanding, she was on a poolside session in April with us. So you can hear her perspective and why this is an issue she continues to champion in the House. And so grateful for her to continue to push this forward. But I'm glad that they raised this. I'm I'm glad they put it out there. It's interesting too, because just on a quick tangent, I saw Michael Burry. Does everyone know who Michael? I mean, no one can hold their hand up. Michael Burry
I
was,
don't think everyone would know
yeah,
necessarily.
he was like the famous investor who shorted the subprime housing situation and did
Big
incredibly
Short,
well
right?
on The Big Short. Yeah. As we know, also somebody from that, Danny Moses, was on the pod. But I saw today that he's leaning in on investments in private prison. And usually I think he has some really good ideas. But seeing that, I was hoping that we could see some decriminalizing of cannabis and some changes around this, because I'd love it if he was wrong on that around cannabis as a thing that's going to put bodies in those prisons. So that's just a quick sidebar. So
Is he investing in private
yeah,
prisons right now?
yeah,
He is on the
yeah,
privatization of prisons.
yep.
Yeah.
So I just think, I don't know. I was like, wouldn't it be cool if this issue just made it less interesting, because less people were going to go to prison for cannabis possession or non-violent transactions of cannabis. So I don't
Yeah.
know. We'll see. I'm very curious to see what happens tomorrow. I know we're going to be in Vegas running around, but I will definitely be watching as much as I can through various platforms.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to hear the talking points there and how they address each one of those three items. I think it's exciting. I mean, you got the Senate saying, or Cory Booker in the Senate saying, yeah, we can do something in the lame duck session. I mean, the House has passed safe banking, what,
7
100
times.
times,
Yeah.
give or take. It's a
Yeah.
lot. It's a few times, and Senate still hasn't moved on it. And then you get the House doing that this week. I know given the lame duck is pretty tight window, and I know they've got a lot going on. So it's good that the House is having this meeting to continue the discussion. I'm not sure, how much the Senate listens to the House and how much they communicate, or how much, but at least, there's activity, and it's like, where there's smoke, there's fire. So maybe something will come out of this. We, last episode, we did our election bets, basically what we
Yeah.
thought
You're right.
would come through, and we were right. Yeah, we were right. I mean, we're working off some good data out there that people had, the polls and things like that.
Mhm.
Yeah, which is, says something, because also in many ways, a lot of these polls were wrong. This whole red wave
Mhm.
is coming and stuff, and there was a big miss there. But so got to give ourselves some credit, I guess, for kind of guessing correctly. But what would you say? I don't know. Do you think this happens in the lame duck? Are we going to see this happen? Are we going to be
Ooh.
surprised? And I know this is an impossibility. It's kind of one of those things, you want to say yes, but you don't want to say no, because you want to will it into being. But
Yes.
yeah, I don't know. I think if it doesn't happen, I guess it's just going to be even more frustrating, because this idea of lame duck session, this idea that we're closer than ever to something like safe, and then should it not happen, what Booker's saying, we do it now or we do it years from now, and it turns into years from now. Oh my God, I'll be so frustrated. I think everyone will be so frustrated with all this talk up until this point. So it has to happen, right? Exactly right.
I mean, like, when I look at the composition of the Senate and I look at what happened in this election, I would say the country is united on only one thing, which is that we think in general the politicians have been dismal at their jobs in representing the constituents of this country. I mean, a 50-50 Senate is like a D+ grade rating for these people who are supposed to be representing us. So instead of having a 50-50, why not focus on an issue that pulls around 75+% alignment, and get it done? So there's a part of me that thinks maybe that happens, and there could be political motivations around how this, bears in terms of a legacy, and hoping to improve the odds of either party. And so I'm hoping we see something. I've been burnt, like, what is it, twice, whatever, I'm not going to screw that up, but I've been burned a lot by this. So I'm also very hesitant to get too excited. And as an investor, I'll just say this, like, the way we invest is though nothing happens at the
Right.
federal level, and we just keep going business as usual. I mean, the Q3 earnings came out. These guys and ladies continue to operate businesses in spite of the lack of action at the federal level, and will continue to do so. So I don't know. What do you think? I want to will it into existence. And I think you and I have talked about, like, manifesting things.
Yeah.
So I'd like to do that. But it's also like, how many times can you get screwed over by someone before you're just
Yeah,
like,
exactly. I mean, the cynic, in me and here is like, no, of course not. If they're talking about this much, nothing's happened. Nothing's going to happen, especially as with this tight time frame. But at the same time, we could be surprised, and I guess it doesn't hurt to bet on it and in the hopes. I mean, anything, I'll just be just as disappointed as I am at this point, regardless. So yeah, it is quite frustrating that it's taken this long, but maybe this constraint, this hey, we have a tiny window of time, and hey, we've talked a lot about this, we should deal with this, might be enough to make it happen, versus the hey, we got years to figure this out, and let us take our time and do our research and introduce something that we think will be perfect, and go through that whole process, which is what we did over the last couple of years. So you never know. I mean, it could come, but at least they're talking about it.
I'll raise one other outcome, which is that nothing happens, and then we do barrel into a recession that very wise people, have been potentially calling for on 2023. And I'll go back to my New Deal analogy that they've got to fund things somewhere, and cannabis taxes are a pretty great source for that. So I don't know. I mean, as of this election, we have 21 adult use states legal, right?
Right.
And I mean, they're not open yet. Missouri sure is hustling, and Minnesota too, by the way. Oh, Minnesota, they're like moving.
Right.
So there's things happening outside of just this. So we should all keep, a perspective. And just because things might shift into 2023 doesn't mean it shifts against us. There are ways things could get done and motivations that could drive things to get done, including tax revenue.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, we've been operating in this industry under federal law the way it is for 10, 12 years. And yeah, what's next year? It's not going to change that much. It's just, I'm ready to see something like this, just out of a kind of a curiosity. Like, what does it look like when the federal government like actually changes its position beyond a memo that we saw under Obama? And I know that, something like SAFE isn't going to be the end all be all, but it's the start, right, of many, many more interesting things. So I'm just kind of waiting for that domino to tip, and maybe it kind of nudges the next one, and it, sits there rocking back and forth, and eventually it'll all go. And obviously just getting a little impatient with this stuff. And I feel like we talk about it a fair amount. I feel like, people in the space talk about it a fair amount, but yeah, of course, regardless, like, this industry will continue to barrel along, and states will continue to press forward, with some framework.
Yeah. And so the hearing is November 15th, for avoidance of doubt, just because I know I screw up when I say things are happening on the pod. But I mean, just one other thought is, wouldn't it be cool if something good happened while we are all together this week? Like the
That'd be
biggest
amazing.
industry cross section of humans gathering in one place. That would be
I
pretty
mean, it
tremendous.
happened in Santa Rosa with a
Um,
Hall of Flowers this year with the Biden announcement, and that was pretty cool to kind of witness that, even though it was a statement, right, and not actual change, but still pretty neat, right? So this one would be the next level if we saw some change here. So
it would.
let's hope, yeah, the government does something, because we were talking earlier, about oversight and regulation, and there's a whole nother industry that's like sucking all the air out of the room when it comes to attention right now, for better for worse, with this whole crypto collapse, right? And
Mm.
particularly around FTX this week, it's always something. Was Lunaterra not too long ago,
Yeah.
and others, and it just seems like they're all just kind of falling down. And I don't mean to like generalize. I'm sure there's some good organizations in crypto. There's I
Are
don't
there
know, some
though?
maybe maybe it's like I don't know, it is funny. It's a funny thing. I think the technology is interesting. I think the application is tricky. This whole is, supposed to be transparent, but then like I haven't really dug into the FTX stuff, but it's like, where's all the money going, right? It's just kind of vanishing because all these transactions are like off chain, right? Because they take it
Hmm.
and they invest. It's just the short of it is it's just not regulated, right? And it doesn't have the same controls ultimately that other industries have. And we're sitting here in an industry that is completely heavily regulated, so regulated, like markets like New York still haven't, gotten off the ground, right? Because they're just building up all this regulation. And then you have another industry out there with no regulation, tons of exuberance, tons of excitement, and then looks like the bottom's falling out pretty significantly right now.
Yeah, I mean, look, the whole crypto thing has gone up my ass so sideways, because I see our industry, we're building businesses. there have been poor shepherds of capital, but then there have been very good shepherds of capital in our industry. And it's building businesses, it's creating jobs, it's generating tax revenue. And I've been going to Miami for meetings about once a quarter. And when I'm down there, I'll go to the Soho House and chat with people. There's a ton of crypto people in Miami. And, I went to the Miami Heat game, and that was the FTX stadium, whatever.
Oh,
And
right.
yeah.
Not
But like,
belong.
I just could not get over every time I had a conversation with someone, like we work in an overtaxed, hyper regulated industry with death by 1,000 cuts, because we just haven't also been taken seriously because of the federal status of it. We're still Schedule 1. So we're still kind of demonized into a corner. I would try to talk with people who are like running crypto funds that were like 10x the size of our funds. And because capital was just flowing in, flowing in, flowing in. And the thing we saw about FTX was literally, once again, just like with Theranos, just like with WeWork, no diligence was done. There was no governance, no board, no attention to detail. And then it turns out this thing is like, have you ever seen that mythology? Like, it's called Ouroboros. It's like the snake that's eating itself.
Oh, sure.
It's
Yeah.
so it's like SBF was like funneling money off into all of these different places. He was even investing into the funds that were investing into FTX, which, like, I'm just like, where is anybody
Wow.
weighing in on conflict issues around all of this? Like making sure that the people who are shepherding these investments, keeping an eye on these investments, requiring reporting on these investments, just nothing is happening. And again, to your point, like, I do actually, the blockchain in particular, I think could be really interesting in terms of creating fidelity and preserving fidelity around assets, especially digital ones, whatever it might be. But I think this whole thing has just gotten so out of hand and so unchecked. And now the regulators are stepping in. And they're so far behind the 8 ball on this. And one of the reasons I think this frustrates me so much too, is an investor in cannabis, I've often been stacked up against crypto, because we're two emerging markets that have kind of come to life around the same time in terms of being investable emerging market categories. And do you remember Silicon Valley, the show?
Of course.
Yeah. And do you, there was like that great episode with the guy, and he's like, wants the car doors that go up. Trace
Oh, yeah.
Gomez. And he's
Right.
like, when they're like, okay, so should we talk about our revenue generation? He's like, don't talk about revenue. Don't talk about anything real. You will raise no money. He's like, you have to just talk about the dreams. And like, I feel like that is the difference between cannabis and what has gone on in crypto. Is this whole thing is all based on like what could happen if this all works as a experiment, but it's not being demonstrated. And in fact, what it is demonstrating is that there's massive issues, because what it's supposed to be very secure. And just over the weekend, somehow $600 million, over $600 million
Vanished,
again,
right.
vanished. So, and again, just from an investor standpoint, it's like the evisceration of capital here, it just evaporates. It's gone into the ether. But like, if cannabis companies fail, for example, MedMen has been being unwound for the last couple of years. There are hard assets, there are licenses, there's even people, there's talent. So there's things you can do with this that are interesting from a business standpoint. And so I can't even, but it's just a tale of two emerging markets, one that is hyper regulated. And we're just like praying for like a little bit of federal guidance around banking for our industry.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. Right. And Silicon Valley has certainly missed a massive opportunity for a proper season, right, on blockchain. I mean, I know they were doing some blockchain stuff, but not like crypto, and totally missed out, because yeah, it's insane. I remember that Doris go like, that's Russ Hanneman, right? And when he's talking about revenue, he's like, don't start talking about
Yes.
revenue. Once you start talking about revenue, it's never enough. It's always, they want more. You got to keep growing. He's like, don't just sell the dream, sell the dream. I love it. I've taken that to heart, here at Headset.
Oh, no, you have not, because as an investor in Headset, we're very metric driven.
Just kidding.
I know. You're like, I'm just talking about the dream.
Gotta
Yeah,
believe the dream of this cannabis thing. But yeah, no, you're right. And I think it's the constraints that we've operated under have forced us to build like these companies that are more resilient. And yeah, they haven't all, some have gone to zero out there, right? Some of those names that you mentioned, and that's just going to happen in anything, right? No matter what, but more so in an emerging category, but not at the scale of crypto. So yeah, it's certainly like the constraints help in a lot of ways. I feel like, we've built a great business here at Headset because of the constraints and things that have happened, like beyond crypto, but like the tech pullback in a big way has been,
Yep.
now, cash is hard to come by, venture is harder to come by. And, so many companies have been set up for like growth at any cost, and you just pour more money into
Yeah.
it because you just care about growth. But because of the challenges of cannabis, a number of years ago, we were like, no, that's not a model that we can have, right? Because capital isn't so free flowing in our industry. And then, now the broader tech world feels that. So I feel like those constraints have helped us in some ways build businesses. It's the constraints we've have slowed us down in a lot of ways as an industry as well. And I'm sure that's, where you're getting was with crypto, where it's like, why can't I get these crypto returns, these insane returns that nobody kind of asks, wait, these returns are
Wow.
so insane. How is this even possible? It's just works. Don't worry about it, right? We're just issuing these new tokens and it just always goes up. But anyways, the constraints are important, I think, in some ways. And as long as they're mindful. And so hopefully the crypto industry can get some constraints and kind of back to the beginning here, like hopefully these constraints at the federal level, like, hey, I got a matter of weeks here to get something done. And I've been talking a lot about federal regulation and what we can do in the Senate here. Maybe with these constraints, I should actually do something before it's too late.
Thanks for listening to the High Rise Podcast, presented by Headset. For more information on Headset, visit headset.io.